Do you think it's an unfair categorization of Gareth Southgate, that his demeanour has changed and he's put out there a sort of a disappointing stance, in particular on Jordan Henderson?
He's combative is the right word. Certainly more combative than I expected, albeit it's no surprise to see him defend Jordan Henderson. But he was fierce in that defence. This was no, fans can pay their money and they're entitled to their opinion line, which is what everybody says when players are booed. It was, even if you think Henderson is a traitor for playing in Saudi Arabia, I don't think you should boo. That's basically the gist of what he said. And he offered that opinion. He wasn't asked directly, do you think they should boo on this issue? He sort of volunteered it, and then he became very sarcastic about the nation's values and sort of saying, I would back Henderson against anyone in this country when it comes to values, basically. So he really went for it. There's probably a lot behind that. He's probably tired of the criticism he receives. He's England's most successful manager in 5 or 6 decades, and he's coming up to 90 matches now.
But he's not being criticised for his record, is he? He's being asked because of his previous for his opinion on this, and I think people maybe expect more from him. But do you think it's just that he's exhausted of having to talk about things that are perhaps outside of his remit, and maybe he's sort of made his bed and he's now having to lie in it and go, well, I just don't want to do it anymore?
I think so, and I think there's the context there of he knows, but he can't say. He knows that 5,000 people aren't booing Jordan Henderson because they're standing up for LGBTQ plus rights. He knows that. He can't really come out and say it because that would involve sitting people down and asking why they're booing. But he knows that Henderson and Maguire have had the brunt of England fans' frustrations for quite a few years now. A friend of mine absolutely hates Jordan Henderson, and this is going back years. He's just he's so overrated. I don't want him anywhere near this England team. And now with what has happened in the past few months, I think a lot of people are using that as a stick to beat him with. I'm not saying that they're wrong to do so, but I do think that people are just booing Jordan Henderson because they don't like him or think he's good enough to be in this England team as a starting point.
Now, Adam, obviously, you sort of had something to do with this in a sense, because you interviewed Jordan Henderson and he put his thoughts over. It was in an interview with yourself, Adam, and David Ornstein. So that was sort of put out there. He was then questioned about it once and then twice, and then it sort of carried on after the booing. What do you make of how Gareth Southgate has dealt with this issue most recently?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, he's probably drained by a lot of the discussion that surrounds England in terms of social issues, a little bit exhausted by it as well. I think everyone kind of feels that at the moment, I think what I would say slightly in defence of Gareth Southgate is I think the things he spoke out about, he's often been led by his players in doing so. So obviously England had situations where, if you think back to that game, was it in Bulgaria where they left the pitch because there was racist abuse of players, and clearly there was then discussions between the players about how they should deal with racism within football, and that clearly became a broader sporting athlete movement. But forgive me if I've got some of the timescale wrong in terms of when that Bulgaria game was in relation to the Black Lives Matter moment. But I think where Southgate has been consistent is basically in standing up for his players, right? So with regards to speaking about, as you say, around white privilege, Black Lives Matters, I think he was led by his dressing room to a large extent in doing so. And then when you see him now sort of defending Jordan Henderson, I think part of the problem he has is if he comes out and it says Jordan Henderson shouldn't be taking money from Saudi Arabia, okay, so what are you going to do about Kyle Walker, Jack Grealish? If you're saying that you shouldn't be taking money from a Gulf state on account of LGBT rights, so you Jack Grealish, Phil Foden, Kieran Trippier, who are all funded by, I suppose, funds that are linked in some way or said to be linked in some way to nation states that don't have rules that we may not like around LGBT rights. So it creates a very difficult situation. Even Harry Kane came very close a couple of years ago to joining Manchester City. So I have some sympathy in that regard. And both he and Jordan Henderson could have taken a very easy route out of this, which is that when Henderson went to Saudi, they could have both just sort of said to each other, look, this is going to cause us hassle. Do we really need to do it? But clearly, Henderson cares enough.
Do we really need to do...
Do we really need to carry on sort of picking Jordan Henderson for the England squad, right? Because it's going to cause everyone a load of grief. And, Jordan Henderson's won a lot. He's won a Premier League, won a Champions League, been at tournaments. Gareth Southgate's got a lot of credit in the bank. They could have just had a conversation where we must shake hands. It's been great. See you soon. But actually, I think it kind of speaks to, one, how much Henderson seems to care about playing for England, that he wants to carry on and kind of endure this discussion. And I know people will be listening saying it's his own fault, and basically. And then it also speaks volumes for clearly the value that Southgate sees in having Henderson involved in the squad. And that maybe almost vibes behind the scenes. Tim was saying before we went on air, recorded, about how Conor Cody was in the England squad for a long time. That's because Conor Cody's a good player, but it was also because of generally what he was seen to bring to the group. And I think Southgate's spoken about the value Henderson brought when Jude Bellingham first came into the squad and things like that. So I think there's a mixture of things going on here. One is that I think Southgate has always been led by his own dressing room. And the reality, and this is exactly what we saw during the World Cup, right? When it came to the whole kind of One Love Rainbow armband, the dressing room wasn't even involved in those discussions, right? Southgate said that himself, right? He said this was a decision that, the FA had to take because we wanted to protect the players from it. If that would have been an equivalent discussion around taking the knee, it would have involved the players, right? And rightly so, because there is that representation within the dressing room. As far as we know, there's no player within the England squad that's come out and said they're part of the LGBT community. And I think that's where it tells us different things. One is that Southgate's following his players, but two, it also says that on the issue of representation for the LGBT community, it's not seen, rightly or wrongly, as something that impacts England footballers. And I think that's where that disconnect is coming. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. But I guess if you were to sort of boil that right down, it would be stop asking me about stuff that doesn't really concern me and shouldn't be concerning so many other people. So do you have sympathy for Gareth Southgate? And do you think that he's being like this for any other reason, that he's almost trying to sidestep it and go, well, look, can we just concentrate on the football because this is going to be my last tournament probably.
I think that's a big part of it. He's already talking about, he's joking about the fact that he's going to be a pundit in 2030, and then he was asked about the 28 Euros the other day and very much spoke in a manner that there's no way he'll be England manager at that point. That's only 5 years away. So that you're then looking at, will he still be there in 2026? Probably not. It feels like to me this is his last tournament. And I think he has been worn down. He's coming up to 90 games now. That's a lot of press conferences with a lot of bad questions and a lot of negativity where there doesn't need to be negativity. Even if England win 3-0, he'll be asked, so-and-so didn't play very well, or what are you going to do next game, Gareth, or whatever. So that must be quite wearing. And let's be honest, he's been almost perfect in the way that he's dealt with a whole range of very sensitive and important issues. Media-wise, he's as good as it gets, really, from an England managerial point of view. So I think that hence why we're making a deal of this, because I think it's one of the few times you can actually look at Gareth Southgate and say, have you got that right, really?
If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.